Hello, I'm Frank Conkling, and this is Panda Consulting's ArcGIS workshop. Today, we're going to look at something a little bit more intense than what we've been dealing with previously. This is validating topology and attribute rules in the parcel fabric. So if you're in the parcel fabric, there are some additional components to going and validating topology that you want to be aware of. So we're going to go over that today. We're also going to go over validation rules and look at that, and especially as it relates to the parcel fabric. Before we do that, let you know, if you look at the QR code here down on the right side, that actually will take you to the Panda Consulting website, where you can find out about who we are, what we do, why we do it, and how we do it. Please go ahead and go over there and pay us a visit. While you're there, you can also go and subscribe to our newsletter to get monthly newsletters about what workshops are coming up and tips and tricks on a monthly basis. Also, for those of you who are attending live, just know that Chris is actually going and moderating the chat room, so that if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and put them up in the chat room, and Chris will stop me and make sure that I go and take care of that and make sure that you get all your questions answered. So let's begin. All right. So the first thing we want to talk about, and we're going to focus in the first half of this on topology. The first thing we want to talk about is a characteristic of the parcel fabric that might not be obvious initially, and that the parcel fabric, in going through and analyzing and working, while you have an active record, the parcel fabric will go and create or add those things that are missing to your existing parcel. So when you create a parcel and it doesn't have everything it's supposed to have, it will go and allow you to go and create those without you doing anything else on here. However, as it relates to topology and the way things are supposed to be, it doesn't necessarily remove things or delete things that shouldn't be there. And that's important. That's something that you sort of have to understand if you're working with the parcel fabric and topology. So let's look at topology and the rules that are associated with topology and the parcel fabric. For every single parcel type that you have stored inside your parcel fabric, there's actually 6 rules that define how it's going to be working. The first rule basically is that the lines associated with your tax lines, in this case, because we're looking at tax parcel types, that they have to have points on the ends of them. And if it doesn't have it, the parcel fabric, when you do a build, will go and automatically add those lines. The next rule, and again, these are line rules. This next rule is that it must have dangles. Excuse me, it must not have dangles in there. It must not be self-overlapping, must not be self-intersecting. So those are rules that look and identify those lines that are not where they're supposed to be. Then the final rule is that the line must be covered by the boundary of the tax polygon. All right, so a line cannot be standing on its own. It has to be part of a polygon. And then the next and final rule associated with any parcel type inside the parcel fabric is that the polygons of that parcel type have to be covered by lines. So how does this actually work? Real quickly, we'll go in here. We are editing inside of a parcel fabric. Let's go and look just to verify again that inside, this is our parcel fabric here. And here's the parcel types. We have tax parcels, we have conveyance division, simultaneous conveyances, and we have sections. All right, those are the types that it's going to be analyzing on here. And if we go to create here, and actually look at this, and let's go and create some, let's do it the other way and show you how it adds things that are missing. Let's go and actually create a text polygon. And when we create a text polygon, all right, it will go and create the polygon for us. It will actually go and select it. We're going to unselect it just so we can see what's going on here. And we're going to zoom in. When we zoom in, it turns out that when we go and, well, let me go create a record. Make sure that this thing actually works. And we'll call this demo. All right, we'll create a record. It's going to do it. And now the parcel fabric is going to go and work against this. So let's take the parcel that we just created and assign it to this record so that now when we click in here, we can go and look at our attributes and see that, in fact, it has gone and stored the global ID of the record polygon that's being created right now. Now, it's a way to go and relate lines and polygons and points to a record, because a record is the primary component of the parcel fabric. But it's a way to go and relate them. So they're the tools that we have over here on the Parcel Record Workflows tab. We have one that allows us to go and take existing geometry and create new parcels or polygons from it, used for splits and pulling things together. We have one called Create Seeds. The Create Seeds tool actually goes and analyzes lines that are related to the current record and determines whether they close or not. And it will create sort of the beginning or the seed of a parcel if, in fact, they intersect. We're not going to deal with that. We're going to deal with the build. The build says, go and analyze all of the features that are associated with my current record and determine if it has everything it needs. Now, remember, what it needs is the lines have to have points on the ends of them. The lines can't have dangles or overlaps or intersects. The lines have to be on the boundary of the polygon, and the polygon has to have lines on it. So when we tell it to build this, it evaluates the topology rules and creates or adds the things that are missing. So real quickly, I'll go and say build. And when I do this, it actually went and took and built the lines and built points on the ends of those lines together with it. So that if we go here and say, select everything associated with this record, I have 4 points, I have 4 lines, and I have the parcel. So the parcel fabric is going to evaluate what I have associated with records and add the things that are missing. Now, if I create something that's not supposed to be there, for example, if I go and take, and I still have an active record, if I take and create a line there and say I'm done with that, let's clear this out. If I then go and say build my active record, again, the build is going to take all the features associated with my active record, evaluate them as far as the rules, and determine and add the things that are missing on here, but it won't do anything to remove something. So when I say build, it's going to go and add the point there. If you were paying attention, it actually went and added the point there, but it did not go and give me any error warning saying, oh, wait a minute, that's not supposed to be there. That's in violation of a topology rule. So what we're going to do today is we're actually going to go and look at how do we check to see whether we have anything extra in here. And if we do have extras, how do we go ahead? What's the workflow that we use to go and create this? So in this case, I'm going to go to my Edit tab. On the Edit tab is, in fact, the Manage Edits. And there's the Error Inspector right there. When I open up the Error Inspector, All right, it will go and place itself here. In this case, I'm going to go and tell it to go ahead and validate my current extent. And I can tell it, in this case, to do the current extent, to do everything. And I can also tell it what rules I want to have evaluated. In this case, I can say, show all the rules. I want you to evaluate every rule that's in here and let it go and validate it. And it will go and tell me that I have 2 errors in here. And the errors that I have is that the first is that the line itself must not have dangles, and that the line must be on the boundary of a polygon. So I'm missing a polygon, and I've got lines that have a dangle on it. So first thing we want to go and look at is, well, if I have an error here, how do I select that feature? And it turns out that right here, if I highlight one of my errors, I can go and say, select the feature, and there it is there. So I can use this if I want to say, let's get rid of that feature. That's wrong. It's in excess, and I want to go and delete it. When I look at the fixes that I have here, that I have available to me, I have extend, trim, and snap. None of those are going to go and allow me to go and delete it. But I can, because I have selected it by using the select features, I can actually go in there and delete it. And one of the things you want to watch out for as Parcel Fabric users is that it will delete that line, but it does not delete that point. So I want to go in and make sure that I go and select that point and only that point and tell it to delete it. Now, when I go in here, I can see, okay, I've got no topology errors in here. All right, so let's go and explore this a little bit more, and let's see if we can find something. Let's go and validate a larger area. Let's go and validate a larger area here to see if we have any errors here. I don't. Where do we have here? We have some errors here. And again, I'm validating just my map extent here. So I have that this line, the error that is on here, must be covered by a point. If this were not the Parcel Fabric, I would be tempted to just say, let's go ahead and create the point. The problem is that if I create the point, it will use, if I have an active record, it will use that active record and store that on the created by record attribute on the line. And just sort of to go and look again, if we look at our tax lines and open up our attribute table to see it, all of our tax lines actually have an attribute called created by record. That created by record is the link, the relationship from the line over to the record, and that is a unique number. It's actually the global ID of the record polygon on there. So if I say create a feature, it's going to give me, again, if I have an active record, it's going to give me that active record. Or if I have no record, it's going to give me no records information on here. In the later part of this, we're going to explain that's a problem. You don't want to do this. You do not want to go and anywhere inside the Parcel Fabric tell the topology error inspector to create something. Instead, what you want to do is you want to go in and go over to the build and tell it, instead of building the active record, to evaluate the overall drawing extent, and you want to tell it to build everything that's missing in the current view extent. Again, build extent. What it actually does is it evaluates all the records, which, by the way, I have them hidden right now. Here's all the records. It's going to evaluate those, and every single one of those is going to look at the lines and the polygons associated with it see if they have everything that they need. If they do not, it will add it. But here's the secret. It adds it with the global ID of that record. It doesn't use any other global ID. It actually only creates a global ID of that record that it's evaluating at one time. So always inside the parcel fabric, if you're using Error Inspector, do not create anything. The good workflow is zoom out, do error inspection, validate and see what errors you have before you try to fix any of them. Run build extent. Once you run build extent, run validate again, and you will find that you have much fewer because it's actually correctly creating the things that are missing. Now, the next thing we want to do is look at some of these other components on here. For example, I have a line here that says it has a dangle. The way I fix that, rather than going to snap, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that parcel, and I can see it right here. I'm going to select that parcel, and I have an option. I can go and delete that parcel, right, by clicking on delete, or I can go and tell it to try to extend. And I'm looking, that's a big extend here. So I'm going to tell it just delete that parcel. Before I do anything else, I'm going to tell it build my extent and then validate it to see if that is an error anywhere. In this case, it says that's not an error anymore, but I do have another one. Must not have dangles. Let's go ahead and select that feature. There it is there. I have that feature selected now. I can tell it delete that feature and then build the extent. So always you can feel safe deleting things and then build them, then tell it to evaluate again. Now, in this case, I'm looking to see I have a point here and I have a point here. Again, I want to make sure I clean up my points because they don't get cleaned up with the topology. Let me go and validate this again. It looks clean, matches topology. I have no problems with it. Let's see if I can find another error here. I have one here that says the conveyance division line must be covered by the boundary of the conveyance division polygon. Let's go in here, select this. All right, let's select it. And now I have 3 of them selected. Let's zoom in and see if we can find them. Let's see what we have here. Here is the conveyance division line here. Conveyance division line here. We don't care about this. And we have a historic lines which are turned off right now. Let's turn those on. There's our lines. And it's giving us an error saying that these lines are not on the conveyance division. Well, let's investigate this and see what we've got here. We have got a conveyance division polygon that goes all the way through this. So this line doesn't actually belong here. So we can again take this, say select this line. Let's clear this out. Say take this, select this lines, and we'll go and select those lines, and we can say delete it, and then run it, validate, and see that in fact we have cleaned up that topology error. Again, here's another one here. It says must not have dangles. So we can select it. We now have 3 here. We can zoom in here and see what's going on. So before we do anything else, we want to go and just run this. Let's go ahead and say, let's build our extent. Let's make sure that everything is put in place here and validate it. Still has that it must have dangles and it must not have dangles, and it's missing on the boundary of here. So let's investigate this a little bit further. Let's go in here and look to see Could there be a gap in here or something that's on here? Does not look like it. Could it be that we have a conveyance division? There we go. If I zoom out on here, turns out that that conveyance division does not have a boundary there, so that this conveyance division line must not have dangles, and that this line has to be on the boundary. Let's clear this. Let's go ahead and take this, select it, and we can go and delete it. All right, build our extent again, validate. We have cleaned out that error on here. Let's zoom out further again. Let's see if we can find some more. Validate. We've got tax lines must be covered by the boundary. Let's go and select this. And when we select it, we can zoom in on it. All right. So this one is kind of unique in that if I do a selection on my tax parcel here, my tax parcel has been cut back. And it looks like I have lines that are beyond this here that aren't supposed to be here. All right. So let's clear this out. And let's say here, let's run build just to make sure, validate, select that, and delete it. All right. Now validate it again. Let it validate, and we have no errors here. We have cleaned it up that in fact it's correct. All right, as I zoom down here a little bit more, let's go and validate. Let's check and see if we've got any others. I think we have one up here. Tax lines must be covered by the boundary. Again, we can select it and zoom in on it. Zoom in here, and we can do a build just to check and see what's going on. Now, this one, in fact, is kind of interesting because if we zoom in here, we can see that, well, actually our tax polygon and our tax line don't line up anymore. So it might be that we want to delete it and have it fixed. It depends upon whether or not this geometry is correct or whether we have a quality-driven workflow. Maybe we should use something to go and fix that. And if we're going to use something, I would probably use align features in here. And I would go and let's set this probably to 2 feet. And I would go in here and I would tell it to go ahead and join here. And I would probably tell it to go ahead and go parallel with this to this line here and tell it to go and align these up. Oh, I've got a topology graph error. What does topology graph error means? It means that, in fact, there was a line or something in here that would get deleted if, in fact, in here it looks like there's lines that would get collapsed and defeated. So while I have topology on here, I might not want to use this tool, or I could use the same thing and just turn off the topology here to no topology. Instead, that's one way of doing it. It's a really quick way of doing it. I'm instead going to use a different tool. I'm going to use the merge points tool, which is located on the quality tab, merge points, and it's going to ask me to go and select some points in here. And when I select points, it's going to tell me all the points that's inside the area I just selected. And it's going to tell me which one do I want to preserve. The other important thing about merge or modify features by doing a merge points is allow the removal of lines and polygons between the merge points and showing me the preview. In this case, I'm going to say, go ahead and do that, and it'll go and do it. Now, I still have a problem here. So I am going to go back. I'm going to get off of merge points. And now I'm going to go in here and see if I can do an align feature using that same alignment that I had before. It's going to go from here to here and tell it to align. And now, because I've already removed all of those extra lines in there, those extra polygons that were in there, it allows me to go and do that align feature and clean it up on here. And now, when I go and say, well, it says, let's validate topology here. And when I validate topology, it says I've cleaned this all up. Again, the workflow, build my current extent, validate topology to see if I cleaned them, and then evaluate what's actually in here and what I need to go and clean up. All right, so let's go and see if we can find any more in here to clean them up. So here I have validate topology. Text lines must be covered by boundary. Again, I can select my features and then zoom in on it. And sure enough, in this case, I have a line that's going out there. And while I can go and do this build on here, what the build's going to do is it's going to add lines. So in this case, this is a dangle out here that really shouldn't be here. I'm going to go and select that along with the point, and I'm going to unselect the polygons around there. And then I'm going to go and delete it. All right. Then I'm going to go and build, and I'm going to evaluate and say, oh, wait a minute. What I selected and deleted was only the current. It wasn't the historic. So let's go ahead and let's highlight all these 3 errors, and let's just remove them all. And clear this out. We want to get used to doing this, where we're going and running build extent, then validating it. The other thing, we want to look at this point again. We want to clean up points. I know that's not absolutely required, but it's one of those things where I like to keep this as clean as possible. Again, build extent, validate my topology. And I think I see a couple more here. I can say, go ahead and validate topology. I do, in fact, have a line here. Go and select it. There's my line. And I can say, go ahead and delete this line. Let's take that point and delete that point also. Build my extent, validate it, and save, just to make sure. All right, so we've gone through a lot of these, and it's the same sort of thing. The thing that you want to go and remember. Here's another line here. Select it. Select that line. Go and say zoom to that selected feature. And again, we can go and just delete that line. Build the extent to make sure it's built, and validate it to see whether there's an error or not. And in fact, it looks like it's free of errors. So again, with topology inside the parcel fabric, you just want to make sure that you in unison, you use the tools that are in there that are Parcel Fabric tools. You want to recognize that the build extent and the Parcel Fabric is additive when it goes through the topology rules, which is what this is. It basically says, evaluate the topology rules and add anything that's missing so I can eliminate that. Build extent, validate the rules. When you have an error, select the error and then say, select that feature that's part of that error, zoom to it, and then go ahead and evaluate on a case-by-case basis, what do I want to do with that? All right. And we saw sometimes you delete it, sometimes you go and do merge points, sometimes you go and do align features, but you want to evaluate it on a case-by-case basis as you get to it. But that goes and only shows us one component of it. That shows us, in fact, the typical type of Parcel Fabric topology rules and what needs to be done in there. However, there's another set of rules that are associated with the Parcel Fabric that we want to make sure that we check. So inside the Parcel Fabric, there is on every single feature class, there's a validation rule. Here is the attribute rules tab for the tax parcels. And you can see there's three types of attribute rules. There's a calculation, a constraint, and a validation. This validation rule says that, in fact, parcel features must be associated with the record that created them. The rule actually says that if, in fact, the features created by record is empty, return an error. That's this error number 1000. And the error message is going to be must have a record. And this is exclusively going to be running from the actual desktop program. This is excluded from application evaluation. This is going to be when we go and run it on here. So I've never run attribute validation. How do you run it? Well, it's a little bit tricky in that it turns out that with the Parcel Fabric attribute validation, there's 4 feature classes that have to be added to your table of contents for it to actually work. But you don't add them just by dragging them in. Instead, you go to any feature class and you right-click on that feature class and you say, add error layers. Add error layers. It will go and add these standard error layers in here. And there is, in fact, the point layers, there's the line error layers, there's the polygon layers, and there is the object layers. So these are the error layers that are associated not with topology rules, but with the validation rules. All right. Once we've done that, then the error inspector allows us to actually go and evaluate that. So on the error inspector, we're going to pull down, and on our source, instead of the topology rules, we're going to tell it evaluate the error layers. This is evaluate the validation rules inside of our database for all of those. And the way we do it, we flip it over to there, and then we say evaluate the rules. And it goes through and analyzes. In this case, we're only analyzing the map extent. I'm going to turn that off and say evaluate for the entire area here and see what we've got. So here, it turns out that we have an error here. So what is this error? What does it mean? If we go over here and look at the details of it, it says that we have a line. It's got a validation error on here. There's the global ID on here. It says it must have a record on here. Well, there's an easier way to find this. If I select it here and I go and say select this feature, there's my feature there. I can zoom to it, and it turns out that I have features here. since I have it selected, when I go and click on this and look at it, I can actually look at that line. And when I zoom down to, I can see my created by record has no value in it. Same thing here. It has created by record here up at the very top on this one has no value in it. So what the validation rule is doing is just running through all of the feature classes and saying what has no attribute on there in the created by record. Okay, so how do you fix it? Here's what you don't do. You don't just go and say, automatically go and select it and tell it to assign it to that. Instead, what you should do is you should identify what record you think it goes to. In this case, I think this goes to this either lot or this parcel that was created. In this case, let's go to its tax slot here. That's the one I think it goes to. So I'm going to go and select that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and tell it, let's activate that record. So activate the record of what I have selected here. Then I'm going to go back here and say, select this feature, select that feature. All right, that's this line. Excuse me. We can clear that off. That's this historic line and this current line here. And I can tell it take both of those and assign them to this record, so that now those have valid assignments on them. They are assigned to the record polygon that actually created those areas that they're associated with. And when I tell it to evaluate this now, it should come back and say, oh, you cleaned up one. What about this one? Let's go and select this one here. All right, let's go and select that one. Let's go ahead and zoom in here and let's do a selection on this tax parcel. Only select that. Let's go ahead and activate that record. In this case, this was a single record that went and did the whole subdivision area. So I can tell it to, I have that activated now. I can tell it to do this, take this record here, go ahead, select it, and now go and assign it to that record. Now it no longer goes and is an error as it relates to the attribute rules. I now have 6 of them. Let's go in here. Let's look at this one. Let's go here and go to here. So it looks like I have a series of lines that, by the way, the red lines are actually coming from my line errors here. All right, telling me that these are errors. It looks like all of these, this one and this one and this one, as I'm going through, you can see it highlighting in yellow, this one and this one and this one. These are all associated with the same thing, and that none of these lines were actually associated with the record that was used to create them. So let me go and make an assumption that this is the actual record, so I can activate the record. Once I have that activated and I have that active record, I can then go in here and say, let's take these and select the records on here, and it will have them all selected on here, both historic and active. And I can say, assign these to that current active record here. Let it perform this. Let's clear this out. Let's evaluate the rules. And in fact, if we evaluate it, our entire database is now clear, both topology errors and the attribute validation rule errors on here. We've cleaned them both out. Again, here's the attribute rules, and here's the topology rules. on here. The topology rules give you fixes. Just sort of to summarize, you can identify the rule, identify the features by using the select features tool, zoom to it, and then figure out what you want to do with it. You might have to go and delete it. You might have to go and realign it and make it fit where it's supposed to fit. The topology rules have to do with making sure whether the lines are on the parcels, whether they have dangles, whether they have overshoots or undershoots, those sorts of things. Those are the types of things you can fix using the standard type of quality driven workflows. Once you've done all of the topology errors, you can go in here and go to the attribute validation errors and have it evaluate those one by one. For those, you select the error, select that actual feature associated with it, zoom in, and this is important. Then select the parcel or the feature that has the record that you should be going with, tell it to activate that record, and then go and take these selected elements again and tell it to assign those features to that record. You'll be much happier. Again, it's trying to take some of the confusion out of how do you use topology inside of the parcel fabric. Once you understand how it works, it's actually not that tough to work with. So thank you. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Hopefully you got something out of it. There's the error inspector, adding the error layers. Again, right click on any layer, add the layers. Once they get added, that'll show you then all the errors. Until those layers are added, you cannot go and do any validation of the attribute rules on there. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Take care. Thanks for attending, and we hope you enjoyed this workshop. If you have questions, would like some more details about anything we discussed during this workshop, or if you or anyone at your organization would like information about training, support, or ways in which we can help you with your GIS needs, please contact me at frank@pandaconsulting.com or call me at 561-691-3277, and we can discuss how we can help you with your needs.